Live.
Hi, Wendy Murdoch here, and thank you for joining me for this webinar on the Surefoot Equine Stability Program. Today I have 3 horses that are going to help me out. We have a mare, and she's going to be on the line. She's been on the Surefoot pads before. We've got Guinness, who's a fox hunter, and he just arrived, so he's still getting used to the arena. And we have a 2-year-old that has some interesting behaviors. Is that?
Just learning how to balance himself, and he is interesting because he was a bucket baby.
So this horse is a bucket baby, and he's just learning how to balance himself. So we tried to pick a variety of horses. Please feel free, if you have questions, to post your questions. I'll be taking those as I can, and we're just going to go ahead and get started. So let's bring, what's his name? Koosh. All right, so Koosh has never seen a Surefoot pad before, and I need to go get the one I want, which I left over here. All right, so if I have what maybe a very unbalanced horse, or a horse that I don't know, or is quite unfamiliar with the idea, a lot of times I like to start with the Physiopad. This is a half Physiopad, so there is a 1 inch of impression material and a 1/2 inch of medium. It's a lower profile pad. It's only 1.5 inches thick, whereas the usual pads are 2 inches. But when I want to introduce somebody that I'm not quite sure about or that's unsteady, I'm going to start with my Physiopad or my half Physiopad. And you'll notice that I drop it on the ground, and I'm going to take my other hand and place it on my lower back. And the reason for this is to keep my hands away from the hoof, so that I have to use my foot to position the pad. And that's awesome. And so I just pick up the foot, and if he falls off the pad, you can see already he's like, whoa, I have to readjust my balance to what's going on there. He's curious, which is great. And Guinness over there is just getting settled. But we can see already there's a breathing change, and that I have to be careful how I move around him because he's unsteady. So Debbie, just let him go for a walk. I have my trusty assistants here with me again. I have Debbie Haddon handling Koosh, Callie King with Noel, and Fran Loftus on Guinness. So we'll just bring Koosh back again, and I'm going to repeat that. So this horse is only 2 years old, which is hard to believe looking at how big he is. We don't know what his breeding is that correct? So we don't know how big he's going to wind up, but he's already a good size. And like teenage boys that can be rather awkward with their body, we can see that there's still a lot of growing to do. So I've just picked the foot up and set it on the pad. He stuck it forward, which is totally okay. But he's already doing what I call checking in. He's already putting his whiskers on me and just kind of asking who I am. And he's curious about me because I've done something that's interesting to him, right? And you can see that he followed his big head and moved forward. But there's our lick and chew, and Deb's going to take him for a walk. The amount of time that the horse is on the pad is really up to the horse. A lot of horses can only stay on the pad like this one for a few seconds, and then they need to walk off because clearly he loses his balance. So I don't insist that the horse stay on the pad. I observe the duration that they stay on the pad. And that's part of the process. Great. How'd that feel when you walked him, Deb?
About the same.
Okay. So he looked like he walked forward with his head a little bit lower. Okay, that leg when I went to pick it up was stiff, so I'm not going to fight with him. He had to reorganize his balance. And what we have to realize is that when I pick up a foot, I'm taking away 25% of his support. So now he's got a balance on those other 3 legs. And if he's not, like, just look at how big he is and how much growing he has to do. He has to figure out how to stabilize on those other 3 legs when one foot's on an unstable surface. And so the fact that that's all right, take him for a walk, that he needed to move off is totally okay. And you notice that I just start with 1 foot, and I've just started with the lowest profile, the half Physiopad. And Deb, we're just going to let him go for a walk for a minute, okay? Franny, why don't you bring Guinness over? So it's always a good idea to let the horse go for a walk after he's been on the pads a couple times, especially with a young horse like that, because he only has so much attention he can give to something in a period of time. And by letting him walk off and have a rest, we're giving his brain a chance to process that information. we have to realize that, you know, doing something unusual or different takes attention, and that's a big demand on a horse. Hi, Guinness. So it's very important that you let the horse look at the pad, touch it with his nose, and check that out before you get underneath the horse. We got a little chew there. I just drop it on the ground to make sure that when I go to pick up that leg, it's no surprise. We have had horses for webinars where it's obvious that just dropping on the ground made them nervous. So it's just a really good idea the first time you've done this with a horse that you check it out. And Franny, has he been on Surefoot pads before?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever worked with him. This is quite a big horse. So again, I'm just going to use my half Physiopad. I'm going to stroke down the leg. I keep my other hand away. And I wait for him to give me the foot, because you can see that he has to readjust his weight to the other 3 legs in order to give me this one. And it's okay. This horse knows how to pick up a foot. That's not the issue. So, you know, you've had him how long?
Oh, I don't know, 6 years.
6 years. And we know we can clean his feet. But here we have the weight of the rider on the horse and a strange environment. And we can see he wasn't trying not to lift the other foot for me, but really that's the one he's standing on for more security. That's like you standing on one leg harder than the other, because that's kind of your habit. Whereas this leg came up really easily, right? So just let him have a longer rein. We're just going to let him stand here for a second. If he walks off, it's totally fine. Okay, and we're going to just watch for any changes in facial features. So the face has a lot of expression. And when we use the Surefoot pads, that's a place to really watch and see lots of changes. Yeah, that was big right there, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. Okay, so his neck dropped about 6 inches, and you could feel that change. It was just sudden, wasn't it? Okay, and we can see that his eyes are blinking, and he's suddenly not interested in the world around him, but much more interested here with what we're doing. And that took us all of maybe 30 seconds. Okay, all right, so we're gonna just let you go for a walk.
Well,
I know that he's really happy right here, okay?
He would stay here all day.
Yeah, but in the beginning, I like to have them walk off because I want the horse to take the information that he's gathered from the pads and go back to the ground, because he's not gonna live on Surefoot pads all his life. The Surefoot pads are there to bring awareness to the horse, to help him become more self-conscious of his balance, to help him experiment with his balance and find a more comfortable place. And their nervous system is designed to seek ease. So I trust the horse to find something that is more comfortable when we offer him that opportunity to become self-aware. And that's really what's going on. Deb, why don't we have your horse come over again, because the other one is sleeping nicely over there for the moment. And I'm going to switch to the firm pad. The firm pads are 2 inches thick. They're dark charcoal gray. That's how you can identify them, with a green top. And they're going to have more give. They're thicker and they're softer than the half Physiopad. So again, I'm just going to let him explore. I'm careful not to let him bite it, right? And you can see that he shifted his weight and he had to follow that a bit. I'm just going to drop it on the ground, slide my hand down the leg, pick up the foot, and he kind of flung the leg forward. So I'm not going to hang on to it and argue with him. I'm going to let him do that, and then I'm going to pick it up again and just see where this foot's going to go. And he's not sure about that at all, is he? Okay, so since the other leg's forward, I'm just going to switch sides. And one of the reasons we chose this guy is because he's a big young horse that's kind of, just figuring out his balance. And I have to be really careful, and I'm trying to guide the foot down. There we go. And then we got an instant chew, didn't we? So he's super curious, but you can see, look at his stance. He's really gawking. Sorry, just let him go for a walk. And that's the thing. He's like that teenage boy that's not really sure what to do with his body parts. He's obviously growing. But if we can impart balance to this horse at this stage, while he is young and still growing, and keep showing him how to balance himself as he matures, then when he's ready to be sat on, he's going to be so much more organized. And that's where you can use Surefoot with young horses. I've actually known horses as young as yearlings where they work with the pads and they get them more balanced on the ground so that when they get on their backs, the horses are much more balanced and secure. And that's what we want when we ride. So it's a great place to start that. Callie, let's just have you bring Noelle over. And she's been on Surefoot pads for a while now, on and off, right? And what kind of changes have you seen by using the pads with Noelle?
I feel like they've just supported our overall work, improving the way that she carries herself, you know, as she's getting fitter, keeping her balanced.
Yeah, so as she improves her fitness, helping her stay balanced, and you can also use them to as pre and post work. Mm-hmm. You can use them for warming up. I have a barn now that instead of lunging the horses, they place them on Surefoot pads to let them relax as they're getting ready to be ridden. And I'm just going to follow her foot. Here we go. We're just going to start with one pad, but it's really obvious that when I picked up that foot, she really threw her chest over to the left. Mm-hmm. Okay, we get an instant lick and chew there. And I'm just going to go ahead and add a second pad, but I could already see by what happened with the first foot that her tendency is to go through this left shoulder. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the things that you can start looking for and observing is the patterns that horses have. Yep. And she's already swaying, right? But the patterns that they have that are going to express themselves when we sit on their back. And so the Surefoot pads can help us not only see those patterns, she's very cute, isn't she? She's just wanting to check me out, but also to help the horses sense the patterns and give them other choices so that we're not constantly having that argument. Like she doesn't go through her left shoulder to make our lives miserable. Yep, just let her put her neck down. Very nice. That's just a pattern that she has. And we can see there that she swayed way left, and then she came back to the right, and we got this big lick and chew, and the neck had come down. Now, she heard something, and she's looking there. And I just let them do that at this point, because horses don't have to be 100% with me. They need to be aware of their environment. But the thing that's important is that they can stand still while they observe. So here we can see that she's standing still, she's quiet, she spotted something, she needs to check it out and make sure everything's okay, right? And so that's totally fine, and we're just giving her that moment. She is still feeling what's happening underneath her feet. And it's kind of interesting, Callie, when I look at her feet, that she tends to stand more to the inside edge. Mm-hmm. So I can see from my perspective how much she's standing on the inside edge of her feet instead of flat over her whole foot. And it's something I would just keep an eye on as I work with the pads, because I'd really like to see that she finds a good balance standing with her feet flat on the ground instead of angled. Right? I think she would stay here all day. So a lot of times in the beginning, I don't want them to stay too long on the pads if they're doing a lot of swaying because they're working those little tiny postural muscles. But in this case, we're trying to do a webinar. And I think if I let her stay, that she would be the star of the show for the rest of the time. So we're just going to ask Callie to walk her off. Julia, have we got any questions?
No questions yet.
Okay. All right. So Guinness, why don't you come on back over here? So we saw that Guinness enjoyed this half Physiopad, so I'm going to move to the firm. We have 4 different densities and 2 types of pads, flat and angled. And I'm going to go to the foot that he showed me was easier to pick up, the right foot. How'd that feel, Franny?
Good, and then he did some little neck head shake when I got down to the end of the ring, so.
Oh, interesting, really interesting. So the hoof is a sensory organ. It's where there are lots of sensors to pick up different ground texture, pressure, temperature, and feedback from that foot to the brain. And so we can access the horse's brain through that sensory organ of the hoof. And I think this is why Surefoot's so powerful, because that foot in relation to the ground has everything to do with how that horse is going to balance and behave. In other words, for the size of this horse, and he's huge. How big is he?
Well, he's not that tall.
He's just massive. So what is he, 1,800 pounds?
Just a little under that.
A little under 1,800 pounds. So the 1,800 pound horse on these 4 small hooves, relatively speaking, any horse is big compared to their feet. That foot meeting the ground is super important to the horse's balance. And the behavior stems from balance. So if I'm like leaning and somebody comes and pushes on me, I'm going to fall over and then I'm going to feel nervous and I'm going to have to react. For me to be able to calm, I have to feel secure to the ground. And you can still see, I'm going to ask and see if I can do a second pad because he's so quiet about the first. And you can see how he can't lift that foot very high off the ground. I have to actually be quick to get that pad under. Oh, there's a big sway, right?
Oh, yeah.
So just let him have a little. When this one sways, you really notice it because it's a lot of mass. And there he swayed way to the right. Yep. And then to the left. And so when we look at the horse in terms of physics, in this case, it's at least a 50-pound head, right? Maybe 60, on a 3-foot lever arm with the center of mass under the rider. And so how this head moves around and what happens to the balance over the feet, can you just give him a little longer rein?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, because we can see that he's, like we see some very definite sway there. He went to the right, and you can see, you can feel it.
Moving a lot
Yep.
behind me.
Yep. And then we got a little breathing change here, and then he sways to the left. But watch as he moves his head. See how he went way over with the shoulder. And so when we think about a horse that we lose the shoulder or we feel like they're not listening to us, we have to look at this mass relative to that foot. And if he takes his shoulder way past his hoof, he's going to fall following that weight, and then we're trying to pull him around. So if we can get that horse to organize over his feet where they feel more secure, he puts them underneath his shoulders, he's more square, then he's going to be able to do his tasks in an easier way, right? But again, I think we have a horse that's going to stay here all day. So just to keep things moving, I'm going to ask Franny to walk off the pads. If there's a lot of swaying, I don't want to leave them there too long in the beginning because that's working all those little tiny postural muscles. And Deb, we're going to have your horse come on over. So it's nice to see the contrast between some horses, it's super easy. You pick up a foot, you put it down, and they're like so in heaven. And then other horses who are, in this case, younger, not as balanced. Okay, we can help him become more self-aware, more self-secure. I just have to wait for that foot. But what I noticed, Deb, was he just was standing better. Yeah, just let him look. And we can see he has a really definite club foot on this foot, doesn't he? Yeah, so, you know, that's just, he was born with that, I assume. And it's very definite, but that's going to affect his balance. Now, it's really interesting. We get this big lick and chew, and he stepped forward from behind, but he didn't really go anywhere. Right? And now there's a lot of stuff happening in this head and neck. I'm not sure exactly what, but we can see that there's a lot of stuff happening there. And we have to realize that there are muscular connections from the tongue through the hyoid bone down to the sternum and the inside of the shoulder. So when we affect that foot, we are affecting everything all up through the throat there. And it's kind of fascinating to watch him. Yep. All right, so let's just take him for a walk. He's burping. Is that a behavior he does? Have you heard him burp before?
He will, and he'll kind of suckle the air as a self-soothing.
Okay, so a little bit of wind sucking actually?
A little bit, but it seems to be, I think it stemmed from being a bottle baby.
Yeah, oh, right. A behavior that he would have picked up feeding from a bottle that he kind of carries through. Yeah, but it's interesting to watch. He's having a big scratch over and so we really haven't done a lot with him, but we can already see a significant change in his balance and just in his general attitude. Let's bring Noelle back. She's snoozing. And I'm going to do something a little interesting with her because she's been on pads before and because we noticed that she really kind of threw herself over. And if you can just angle a little toward the camera, it'd be great. Through that left shoulder, I'm going to take the impression pad, which is the orange top one. It's our stiffest pad, very firm, and the firm pad, and put it on top. And I'm just going to stack these two. I'm going to let her look at it. And again, she's been on pads before, but we saw a definite pattern, and Callie's reported on that pattern. So I'm going to pick up this left front. I have to carefully place the pads, get my hand out of the way, and then just set the leg down. And then she steps off, it's totally fine. Okay, and she's just checking me out. And watch her chest. But we can see that we really rotated the rib cage, especially when she looks this way over into that right shoulder. Okay, but she's clearly not distressed by this. If she was, we'd let her walk off.
Yeah.
Right? And we're just giving her the feeling of what it would be like to go more into the right shoulder. And you can see these pecs working. So even though she's like paying attention to those horses, see all that muscle shift right there? And she's experimenting with that, with her head way around to this side. That's fascinating, isn't it? You can see the chest muscles contracting. And we're just gonna let her look over here, because what we don't know at this moment is she experimenting with moving her neck? You know, just because she seemed to see somebody, we know she was sleeping a second ago, and we know she's seen them before. And now she's come back. And she's extremely content to stand here like this.
Yep.
So a lot of people, when I have put up pictures of a horse on double pads, are thinking like, oh, that's really crazy. But we can do it if the horse likes it. And that's the thing, is if I'm taking a picture of it, that means that horse stood long enough to like it and to just hang out there. And now we can see, look, her eyes are getting sleepy. And she's actually very content to be on that double pad. Yep. And again, we just watch how she moves this, in her case, probably a 40-pound head at the end of a 3-foot lever arm, and just how much moving that head is affecting this chest. And that's, you know, like so important to consider when we ride, that when we take their head around, we could be throwing them out through the opposite shoulder if we're not careful. And we really want them to find that middle place where their back is upright and they can lift their back. Yep, we'll just let her step off. It's okay, what's a sec? Because she stepped back, right? Yep, we'll just wait for a sec. And I'll just take this pad out of the way so that when she walks forward, she can walk forward without it being there. And the neck really just dropped, didn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And we can see now the neck actually has this lovely, long, soft length to it, right? And the eye is getting really soft. Yep. And she just heard a sound that caught her attention, but she was ready to go even more into herself. So we see fight and flight is the sympathetic, you know, the head up, the reactivity. And then we see the horses go into what's called parasympathetic, rest and digest. The neck comes down. We see this nice softening and relaxation. Yep. And it's so interesting to see how she just carefully stepped off that pad, right? We just gave her that time to choose that. And then from parasympathetic, it's not uncommon to see horses go down another level, which is probably a lot of endorphins. They look like they're sleeping, but they're really still quite present. And that's one of the fascinating things, that you can use this during a lesson. If you're struggling with something, stop, put them on the pads, and then give them a few minutes, and then continue with the lesson. And very often you'll get exactly what you were struggling to get, because we let the nervous system calm down and just gave them that moment to rest. All right, so we're gonna let her go for a walk. Where's Guinness? He's sleeping over there, yep.
Wendy, we had a few questions come in.
Great.
And then I think it's probably time for our first little prize.
Oh yeah.
So the first question from Eileen, she had two, was, can you try these pads while the horse is on cross ties? I don't have anyone to help me hold Bandit, and I don't want to do it when he isn't being held. I guess she doesn't have any help at the barn while she's there.
It's a great question, because especially when you're first starting out, you do not want the horse on the cross ties. If he doesn't like the pad and he goes back and he hits the cross ties, that could be an ugly situation. So a lot of times what I do is I actually hold the lead, and or you can have a round pen, you can have them in a round pen, or in you got to be careful in a stall. It's too enclosed a space to start with, because if the horse needs to move and you're there, it's not so safe. But I would just say, you know, you can hold the lead shank and just pick up the foot and place the foot on the pad. And if he walks off, you're going to let him walk off anyway. So I can demonstrate how I'll do that with Callie's horse when she comes back. In the meantime, with Guinness, I'm actually going to switch, and we're going to go to a back foot, Franny. And I'm going to use a slant. So if we just step him another step forward. Yep, just so that we have his rear end a little more toward the camera. There we go. Again, I'm going to let him look at it. It's angled, so I'm going to do heel high. The yellow top indicates that it's the slant. I put the slant down. And when I go to the hindquarters, it's really important. You saw I kind of flinched a little. It's really important to let them know I'm coming, right? So I like to run my hand down along the horse. And again, my other hand is on my back so that it's not in the way. And I pick up the foot, kick the pad into place. And if I don't get it perfectly in place, it's totally okay, right? I'm not going to fuss about it, especially at first. And he's just resting his toe, and we'll just let him do that, okay?
Really is.
Yeah, and he's just really resting that way. But this is fine, and I've seen lots of changes from a horse just resting the toe on a pad. So it's not important per se to have them stand fully on it. He's still getting information. And especially the first time I've done a back leg, they're not sure what's going on. So let's just have you walk a circle and come back. You had another question from Eileen?
Yes. She said Bandit is still showing some anxious behavior since we moved to the new barn. I don't know if adding something new at this time is the best idea. Your thoughts?
Oh, so the question is that Bandit is moved to a new barn, Eileen's horse, the one she asked about. She doesn't have a helper, and how can she do this on her own? And he's anxious. And I would actually say this is a great time to do Surefoot, because Surefoot can help him reduce that anxiety. So if I was starting with a horse that was a bit nervous at a new barn, I would take him to a place in that area where he's a little calmer. Say if he's a little bit more relaxed, you can stop right there, Franny, good. If he's more relaxed, say out in the field I wouldn't do this with other horses around, but if he's more relaxed away from the other horses, or if he's better around some horses, I might do this where he can see others. And I would just start, and I'd only do maybe 5 minutes, right? I just offer him, and I'd probably start with the firm pad, and I'd start with the front foot, and I'd just offer it to him. And that's the beauty of this thing, is the horse gets to choose. Your job is to facilitate. So if he doesn't want it that day, fine. But I would offer it to him every day for at least a week and just see. Because a lot of times what happens is at first they're like, oh, I'm nervous and I don't want to, oh, goodness. Okay, we can see what just happened here, right? That he just totally stood on the pad and the neck dropped. And that only took like what? We've only been
Not a minute.
Not even a minute, right? So it's actually surprising how quickly horses recognize the comfort and do what he just did. And I've never put Guinness on pads before, and Franny's never put Guinness on pads. So it's not like, this is something he's done. This is how horses respond, is they instantly feel that comfort and they let their neck down, they go into that rest and digest. And your horse Bandit really could use some of that right now. So I actually think it'd be worth a try. Yeah. We're supposed to give a prize out. All right, so there was a contest for a pair of Surefoot pads for anybody who was entered who had actually signed up for the webinar, whether or not you could attend. And the winner of that one is Nancy Burmeister. So if you've tuned in, you are our winner of the Surefoot pads, and we will be in touch. We have your email address. We'll contact you so we can ship a pair of pads to you. We're going to give away a couple other little prizes here in a minute, but we've noticed that Guinness is really relaxed. We're going to send you for a walk. We're going to bring Debbie's horse back.
And Mom Kush is heading down. There was a question about the slants. Why did you use a slant
Heel high.
on the back?
On the back foot. I can use it both on the front foot and the back foot, but the reason I like to do it heel high, and I also use this for people, by the way, I actually use most of the pads for people, is that we want to affect also the proprioceptors in the joints. So proprioceptors are the things that let us know where we are in space. It's the thing that lets you grab the candy bar out of the back seat driving 60 miles an hour down the highway. Right? So our joints have lots of proprioceptors, and when I stand on the slants heel high, you can see how that just softened my knees and let my balance shift back. And so now I can get this support through my heels where there's a lot of sensors in the foot. I can use it in front too, but I typically use it heel high like this because I want the horse to rest back into the slant. And if I stand on it heel low, you can see how my knees straighten and my back hollows. So that's why I typically use the slants heel high, and you'll see the horses like Guinness just kind of rest back into it, and then his neck drop like a rock.
And when do you use the slants?
I use them a lot, actually. I really just, when I want to make a change in the angle, when I want to offer them something other than flat. So This horse here, actually, it would be really interesting to offer him the slant on the left front, the flatter foot, and give it a little heel support. So in his case, I'm going to use this because of that club foot. I'm just going to pick up his foot and set it down. And now we've made the angles a little more similar. And that's okay if he steps off. Yep, just walk a circle and come back. You saw for a moment he got a lot more square and then he lost his balance. But we can see that his neck is down, his walk is relaxed. And I might even do something like this with this horse. I'm going to grab a soft pad. This has the most squish, the blue top. And I'm going to offer him a soft pad under the club foot. So that's going to have more squish. Yeah, careful. There you go. So I don't mind the horses looking, but they're not allowed to use their teeth. And we got a lick and chew, but his foot missed the pad. No big deal. I'll just do it again. And you see, I just go with him. Yep, it doesn't matter how the foot's on the pad right now. We're going to let him feel that for a second. And look at how it really slid forward. And then he had to move. So just see if he can stop. Almost. Yep, just turn and come face the other direction. Yep. And so he's dropped, and with him, we're just giving him little bits of information. Gawky 2-year-old, short attention span. We don't need to see huge changes in these horses the first time out. In fact, a lot of times the change happens when they're resting out in the field. Just gonna let him, he's just kind of checking me out a little bit. I have to be careful with my glasses. They're my good ones, right?
No.
So Deb's doing a great job of just keeping him, yep. And look at how much we raised the front end there. The whole front end of the horse has come up, right? And we're just gonna let him hang out there. He just needs to check me out a little. This is just curiosity. Yep. But you see how he stepped off really carefully. And look at how that top line has actually changed. I'm gonna set my glasses down. So with these young horses, short duration, doesn't have to stay on the pads long. You're just wanting to start putting a little bit of information into the nervous system through that foot. And let's bring your horse back. Do we have any other questions there, Julia?
Yep, we had another one come in from Bonnie.
Yep.
He said, my gelding has a loss in hind patella. I don't want to have the ligaments cut to start with slant pads.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great place to start. And I'm going to do something here with this horse because we know that she tends to go through her left shoulder. I'm going to use the medium pad this time. It's more springy, and I'm going to put it on the diagonal. So I'm going to pick this foot up, set it on the pad, and then I'm going to come to this back foot. Or you could use a slant pad behind. I'm just showing off the medium right now. I'm going to pick up the foot. I just kind of go with her. I have to kick the pad where I think her foot's going to come down. And you can see why it's so important that your hands stay away from the foot if the horse is a little fussy. Sometimes they have to put that foot down quickly because they've lost their balance. You don't want your hand there. So that's why I recommend you keep the other hand on your back. But we're just going to let her stand there for a second. And she just has her toe resting. We can see the nice relaxation. She was sleeping in the corner anyway, right? But we can do things like diagonalize or put pairs of pads on the same side, like I could do the front and back on this side. And so with that horse with the patella, I would start with the slant and then experiment a little. Might even, if one's worse than the other, is just at some point, not in the beginning, double stack that with an impression with a slant to give a little more lift into that leg and see what he does. I mean, if he steps off of it, it's no big deal. But we've got to get the muscles around that stifle strengthened. So, walking your horse up and down hills is really, really good. And using the Surefoot pads to change the angle to give them a different feeling in those joints. Yep, and it's so interesting. We can see how she was so careful about just shifting her weight back. Right? And now, isn't that fascinating? I don't know if you could see it, but she went from her left shoulder and really went back onto that right hind leg. And so this is where it's so important, especially in the beginning, to just let the horse have the time to kind of feel the pads out and do that little experiment. And she fell asleep, didn't she? because they're sensing their feet. And it was so nice to see her shift back into that right hind, and then everything squared up, and now she's really, the lip is quivering. There's our little gulp. Yep, and look, there she shifted the weight really onto the right hind, and now watch the rear end. Big sway, wow. Is that showing up on camera? No, it's a huge sway. We can see it from here, but look at this relaxation in front. And so she really loaded onto that right hind, and her rear end just did this huge sway, and then she moved that left hind leg. But this is where, you know, she's been on pads before. We can let her just sit there and kind of process for a little while and really feel it out. And the medium pads are nice and springy, so they have more of an upward feeling than the other pads that sink down. So I hate to disturb her, but we really need to, maybe we can leave her there and have Guinness. Guinness, can you come on over here? Because she's having a really nice moment that I don't want to disturb.
While Guinness is coming down here, we had a few more questions.
Yep.
So another one from Bonnie was, shod or unshod? Does that make a difference?
Oh, great question. Shod or unshod doesn't make a difference. In the beginning, I've been doing this for 6 years now. It's my 6-year anniversary, so thanks for joining me for that. And I thought it did at first, and I can report that after 6 years, I see no difference between shod and unshod horses. You have to be careful. Sometimes the unshod horses have sharp edges and can slice the pads. They can get a little more damage with unshod. But these pads, we've designed them to be super durable. They'll get some nicks and tucks and tears, but they are warranted against breaking. They're warranted against delaminating if the surface comes off. So when people email me and go, oh, my pad got a cut, I'm like, yay, you're using your pads. I want them to look banged up and used and worn, because it means you're doing Surefoot with your horse. So I'm going to come on over here, and we're going to do a slant under each hind foot. And I'm just,
Another question about the slant, Wendy.
yep.
Susan says the horse is very heavy on the forehand. If using the slant on her hind leg, also learn to reduce the action.
What I can say is it may help her learn, because what it does is, using Surefoot in general is actually going to be really beneficial, because a horse heavy on the forehand is leaning on that forehand, and when they start to feel the pads, they're like we saw here with Noelle, who's now licking and chewing and yawning. Thanks, Guinness. You'll see them, they have to figure out, well, how do I shift my weight? Right? So if I habitually stand like this and nobody makes me aware of it, I'm just going to keep standing heavy on my front. And oftentimes with those horses that are super heavy on the forehand, their front legs are rather rigid. Like it's very difficult for them to pick up the leg because they've put too much weight there. But as they start to do Surefoot, they start to pick up the legs, and they naturally have to change the balance. They naturally have to come back. She chose to just have the right hind now, didn't she? That's really interesting. All right, so we're gonna, with Guinness, we're gonna kind of go for broke here. I'm gonna add a third foot. The reason for doing this is that he's super quiet. We could actually stop with what we've done so far with him as a session. Well, yeah, he is. But I just want you to see that you can progress to more feet. The goal is not to have all 4 feet on a pad. The goal is to let the horses have an experience where they become more self-aware, reorganize their balance, like we saw with Noelle here, who is now solidly resting on that right hind leg, and really just her whole balance is shifted in front, right? So the horse that was going through the shoulder has now really come back onto this right hind. And so there's a classic example of a horse that would have been a little more on the forehand on that left front. But here with Guinness, I just want to see what would happen. And if he can't do it, he'll step off. And that foot's too difficult to pick up. So I asked twice, and he was very responsive. I'll give you my foot, but I need to put it right back down. And we knew that from the beginning, that that was the more difficult front foot, a little heavier. And this one, he's like, okay, I can, he had to move his head, didn't he? Yep, but he can pick this one up. So if you think about, you know, you're sitting at a table at dinner, and there's one short leg, and that table rocks. That's kind of like what's going on here, is that he's rocked onto that left front for whatever reason, and so that leg is more difficult to lift. And to force him to pick it up would force him to have to brace himself, okay, I got to give you this leg. If you're cleaning out the feet, that's one thing. But with Surefoot, we want to say, wow, that's really hard. So let me find a leg that's easy. And let me help show you where you're holding your weight, how you're standing on your 4 feet, so that we can get to weight bearing that's much more even and balanced. It's going to make a better ride, a more balanced horse, a more confident horse, a more relaxed horse. Right? How's it going up there?
Still moving around.
He's still swaying, but he's like this slow boat. He's kind of like a Martha's Vineyard ferry. All right, Deb, let's bring your horse back. Noelle finally burped and she walked off there. But again, we can leave her for longer because she's been on pads before. And so my biggest concern with just starting out is when they're doing all that swaying, those little tiny postural muscles can get sore. And I've seen horses after a couple of Surefoot sessions that all of a sudden they're like, oh, it's like you starting out a new exercise program. So even if they're enjoying it, we have to be good stewards in the beginning and make sure that we're not taxing those muscles too much, even if the horse is really content. Oh, slants are busy over there. So I'm going to go back, Debbie, to something a little simpler, to the flatter pad. And I'm not even going to go to this horse's hindquarters today because I think that the way he stands in front, it would be such a struggle to start working with his back end that I want to give him a good experience and not overload him. And if the behavior starts to worsen, a lot of times that can mean that he's had enough. And it's kind of a little bit worsening, isn't it? Yeah. So I'll just ask one more time with something simpler. And that's, people say, well, how do I know when the session is over? The horses will show you. They'll say, yeah. He's like, that's too much for me. I've had enough. So take him for a walk. And so like with these young horses, short duration, a little bit. I've never seen the horse before. The best thing for him is to go out in the field and rest for a while and then do this again in a few days. And again, a short duration. Because we could see it had an effect, but we can also see that now he's struggling and his nervous system can't quite figure out how to make the necessary changes to really just stand on the pad. Like Guinness here, who is now swaying like crazy. All right, so we're going to give away another giveaway. I've got a Surefoot hat here, and Julia is going to just pick a name from those of you that are on the webinar, and you're going to get a Surefoot Equine Stability Program hat. So who's our winner?
Jennifer Alcott.
Jennifer, oh, hi, Jennifer. Thanks for joining us. Jennifer's out in my county. Yeah, so I know her. That's great. Well, you're going to get this Surefoot hat. I'll send it out to you. And anybody who's tuned into the webinar, we're offering free shipping. But if you've tuned in, you can go to surefootequine.com, or murdochmethod.com and go to the shop, and you can get free shipping in the USA only, guys. So I'm sorry, all of you outside the United States, the free shipping offer is only within the US, but you guys, free ship, I think it's free ship 18, isn't it? Free ship 18. Yep, that's okay. All right, so, oh, free.
Ship free.
Ship free, yes, sorry. We'll post it. Ship free 18. Let's bring Noelle back one more time. Guinness is, wow, did you see that sweat? No, the camera wasn't on him. So, some people ask me about doing this with horses that are neurologic. And that's a great question, and that sway would have been perfect for that question. That a horse that's neurologically sound will sway, but he's not going to fall down. If there's any question about the neurological health of the horse, I would always say you recommend to talk to your vet first, find out if this is something that they think would be okay, and start with, I'm going to grab it over here, the impression pad. And we'll put Guinness on an impression pad just so you can see. So this is the stiffest pad. It's very firm, and it's on the Physiopad, it's got an inch of impression. And the idea is that we want to offer comfort, but not instability. So the other pads have a lot of give. I'm just going to wait for him to figure out how to pick up that foot and reorganize the balance. I'm going to let him stand on that for a while. So this is a really stiff pad. It's going to give to heat and weight. You can see he really liked that, didn't he? Mm-hmm. He came right down on it. A lot of pressure on it. And it's going to give to heat and weight, and we can see the impression of the foot when he steps off and see how he's distributing his weight over his whole foot. Now, ideally, we're going to see a nice impression of the frog and a good balanced weight. I'll see if I can do the other foot. It's out to the side, so I think I can lift it. You notice I just toss the pad down, set the foot down, and here he is on 4 pads. But watch Franny, big swing. Yeah. And he stepped off this one, so I'm just going to carefully come in here and kind of kick it out. And we can see the impression of his foot here. Now, the longer they stand on it, the deeper this is going to be, and the colder it is, the longer it's going to last. But we can see that there's more pressure into the toe here, and that the frog is already kind of disappearing. So this is a really nice pad for a horse that's very unstable. I've used this with thoroughbreds that are really unstable coming off the track. It was the only pad this one thoroughbred wanted. His pelvis was really out of whack, and after standing on this pad in that afternoon, his pelvis was level. It was really incredible, actually. So it gives great comfort, gives slowly to heat and weight. Horse that is nervous, it's a great pad because it's not going to spring on them if they step off, and it's going to give us the impression of that foot. Why don't you walk off and we'll just see what we got on the other one now.
Feels like he's just going into the ground over here.
Yeah, he's really sinking into
From
it.
here, if I look straight down, his
Yeah.
shoulders are all.
And horses will stand in what I think of as very peculiar positions, but they're like totally relaxed. Yep. We get that slow walk off, and I'll just pick up the pad, and we can see here now we've got a lot of pressure up through that. His frog made some impression, but it was just kind of off the edge, but we can see the shape of that foot right there. And do we have another question? Because we're starting to get close on time. Okay. All right. So what are we going to do? With this one, I think what we're going to do is a lateral pair of pads, just so I can demonstrate that. And actually, let's do her left side.
Okay.
Because what we saw when we did the diagonal is that she stood more strongly on her right hind. So I'm going to take one pad and place it underneath the front foot. I just happen to have a firm pad in my hand, so that's what I used. And I happen to have an impression pad in my hand, so I'm going to take that. I'm just going to put that underneath the back foot. And we're just going to give her a moment to stand there. And we see how she's really put that right hind back and is kind of strongly pushing on it. But we'll just give her a minute. And so with this horse, I think we could do almost any combination of pads to bring in awareness for different things, because we can see that everything we do is interesting to her, right? Even if it doesn't look so comfortable to us. It's yep, she's getting really sleepy. And so that's the thing, is you've got 4 hooves, and if you just want to start out, I just suggest like a starter pack of a pair of firms and a pair of slants. So you have the 2 different angles, and you have 4 pads. So ultimately, when your horse is ready, you can do all 4 feet. But it gives you a nice kind of variety to start with, and you can always add to your collection. You can always add a pair of mediums later or something like that. And we're going to do one more prize. We're going to do one more Surefoot hat. So Julia's going to pick a name.
Barbara Parks.
Great, Barbara Parks, you have won yourself a Surefoot hat. And so we're going to post this video up on YouTube so you can go back and watch it anytime you like. I think what the horses that we're working with are pretty much, you can see they're about done. So let's just bring you guys in. I'm going to thank you for coming and being willing. Yeah, interesting. She reorganized there and really stepped on that left hind. So the young horse with Deb, short duration, little bits of information, probably like every 3 or 4 days, not that often, but you want to keep putting in little bits of information about the balance. And then Guinness is our experienced fox hunter. He's so cool. You know, those horses can really benefit from Surefoot for relaxation. They've worked hard, you know, helping them rebalance. And then for your pleasure horses and your riding horses, one of the things that's so nice about Surefoot is that it builds a really deep relationship between you and your horse, because the horses recognize that you're the one who brought them the comfort. And when I'm teaching, my students' biggest complaint, because I typically are working with the riders and they're under saddle, my students' biggest complaint is that the horses will not leave me because I'm the one who's brought them comfort. So just think about that if you want a really good relationship with your horse, and think about Surefoot so that you and your horse can really have a wonderful time together. So thank you guys for helping me out, and thank you all for tuning in. And until next time, make your horse happy 1 hoof at a time.